Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? And I'd like to welcome you to today's presentation for Artec Studio 18 and what's new. Um, Welcome. This is Direct Dimensions, and definitely what we hope to convey today is just who we are as a company, some of the projects that we've worked on, and this technology. Most of you are familiar with it already, but we'll kick it off first with Michael Raphael, who's the founder of Direct Dimensions, to tell you a little bit about the company and its capabilities, and then we'll kind of go from there. So, Michael, if you want to take it from here.
I'd welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. And we're real excited to be bringing you this new update on new Artec Studio 18. There have been a lot of changes, and you're going to hear about many of those. But to give you just a few minutes on Direct Dimensions, we have been at this a long time, as it says here. 1995 we started, and so we've been scanning for a long time, and you name it, we scan it across a wide range of applications and industries. And we use a tremendous number of scanning solutions that come from companies all over the world. The best of breed, we like to say, the scanning tools that provide the highest return on investment, the largest ease of use, largest utility, these types of things. We also represent and provide support and training, and hence the reason we're bringing this webinar to you today, to keep our customers and folks updated on some of the latest advances in particularly Studio 18. But as it says here, and you see the photos and the images rolling around, we scan across a wide range of applications from manufacturing and consumer products. We scan buildings, we scan lots of aircraft and ships and subs. We scan people, we do medical applications, and we push this technology to its limits in as many ways as we can. So if anybody, either today or later, has any questions about scanning, I welcome you to reach out, and we're here to help with any understanding that one would need.
So pretty much would like to just kind of start. I mean, most of you are familiar with, or you might have one of these scanners already, but just kind of talk about where this technology is. It's fantastic is that you're using one of these scanners for scanning people, buildings, art objects. And it all feeds into the same pipeline, which is fantastic, is that you can all process the same data in Artec Studio 18 and moving forward. So that's amazing with this technology. And we'll first like to kick it off with introduction with Sam, who's been scanning with the technology for quite some time. And I don't think there's anywhere Sam hasn't been to scan objects, people, cars, you name it. So he's been using this technology for quite some time in a wide range of different situations. So if there's anyone that I ever have questions to ask, I go to Sam, and he generally 99% of the time, he's like, I got an answer for that. So we're here as a resource for you. You can always reach out to Sam and myself to help with any type of Artec specific questions that you may have. So Sam, I'm going to kick it over to you. And these are some of the things that you can start to present on. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
Guys, I'm Sam. I'm gonna be talking about mainly the user interface stuff that's new in Artec Studio 18, and Arthur's gonna hit some other features. So the first thing that they changed in Artec Studio, which is right off the bat, is when you open Artec Studio, it's gonna give you this homepage, and if you look, it's a little different. The main thing is that you can view recent projects based on images. So every time you save an Artec Studio 18 project, it gives you a screenshot of what's in that image or in that project, and then that is displayed here. So depending on how you want to view this, you can view it by date modified, alphabetical, etc. Or you can also view it in this view or by list, whatever your preference is. And then the other cool thing is in this homepage, you also have resources. So if you're need to see the manual or you want to see release notes, tutorials, etc., you can access all that in this little resources tab, and it will just directly link you to the website. And then going forward, if you have a project open like I do, you can click the home button and it opens your project. And if you ever need to go back to that home screen for whatever reason, you can click the home and it'll bring you back to this page. So now you can toggle between both. So in this case, I'm going to open my project that I already have done here. And I want to talk to you about some new features that are implemented in Artec Studio 18. So one of the cool new ones is this lighting source control. So I already have a finished model here, and you can see it's textured, has all this great color information, and I can actually turn on my lighting control. So if I go down to this little box here and I click lighting, I can show the directional lighting, and I can change this based on how I want to screenshot this. If I want to show people some realistic renders, something quick and easy without going through another software, I can, adjust all these different conditions. And it doesn't just apply to the colored model. So if I turn off texture and I turn on scan color, you can see now I can also adjust it in this view as well. So that's one of the cool things. Another really interesting feature that I use quite often now that I've been playing with Artec Studio 18 is this ability to select individual frames from a plethora of scans. So I have this scan open, it has 225 frames. And in the past, if you had a misalignment or you had a frame that just didn't belong in there, you had to manually go in and kind of, search for it in the frame tab by going through individual frames. Whereas now, if you press Alt and you click that individual frame, it isolates it, and then you can edit it, delete it, etc. And it gives you the number. So if the misalignment or the thing you're looking for is in multiple different scans, you know the number and you can kind of gauge which one it is. So there's that. And this also applies in the eraser tab as well. So if you go to the eraser tab in the editor tab and you do the same thing, the only difference is in the object selection mode in the eraser tab is that instead of treating the frames as frames, it treats them as objects. So if I have my object selection on, I can easily just highlight that, and then it highlights all the rest of the frame data within that frame. Whereas before you had to go in and manually do it. One additional feature that I would like to talk about is the locking. So in the past, you could lock frames and data sets and objects, and it would be kind of hard to gauge what is locked and which isn't locked, especially if you had a lot of things within the project and you had different locked folders and things like that. So now when you lock something, it turns this really cool gray stripe pattern, which you can kind of visualize. So if I turn on anything else, so now you can notice that whatever is locked is gray and everything else is the scan color that's presented in the little boxes over here, which is quite useful. And what this does, it actually makes it immune to the eraser tab. So if I go back to the eraser tab and I click anything I want to erase here in this mesh. So if I click this, it will only erase what's highlighted and not what's locked. So if I erase that, it doesn't erase all the other selection, which is quite useful. Let's see. So one other thing that's kind of interesting, the UI at least, is the ability to do frame decimation. So what this means is, so say like I'm scanning with the Leo or the Spider, and I might be new to scanning, I might be advanced, I might have over captured something, or I have a huge part and I want to reduce the file size. What Artec has introduced is this frame decimation. And basically what that allows you to do is to reduce the number of redundant frames. So in the tools tab, there's a button that says scan decimation, and you can basically give it a decimation percentage. So 40, they say start at 40% is ideal. and then you can go down from there. And what that's going to do is it's going to go through all those frames, all 200 or 500 frames here, and it's going to reduce those to 40% based on how much overlap is presented in the actual model. So this reduces the file size, and it just makes it easier for processing because there's no redundant frames. And then since we're over here, the registration tab, if you go into there, you can see that things have been kind of like pushed together here. So before, you know, you had all these different things, but now it's all in one little menu. And so now you actually have the ability to do the registration with different scanners. So instead of doing them all individually and then hoping they go back together, or, you know, running the gold registration multiple times, you can turn on the Spider and the Leo scans, and it gives you this little thing, and it says, you know, scanner specific, individual settings for every scanner, type in the current scan selection, and then you can change these settings for each one. So I could say, you know, these are my Leo settings, and then these are my Spider settings, and I can run them simultaneously instead of doing it twice or 3 times, etc. So then that just reduces time and etc. So for the fusion, you can see that there are a lot of areas are consolidated in here. So there's no more, a few things are gone, but you can actually notice that the sharp, smooth, and fast fusion are gone. You only have the ability to change the sharpness level. So they consolidated, they merged this into one little setting here. So sharpness at 0 is the equivalent to smooth fusion at 17, and vice versa. 1 would be the sharpest, and then you can also put the slider in between here, so you get the best of both worlds based on what you need. So you can adjust smooth or sharp, etc. And so they also introduced this new hole filling method. So if you have 2 different types of scanners in terms of Spider and Leo, or Spider Eva, Leo, Eva, Leo, Spider, you can actually turn on by relative radius. And what that's going to do is it's going to take both sets of scan data, and because each one is being meshed at a different resolution, the hole filling is slightly different. So like at 0.15, the triangle sizes might be smaller versus at 0.35 or 0.5, which is larger. And so what this is going to do is it's going to run an algorithm where it kind of merges those 2 together, so it knows the types of scanners, and it hole fills smartly and accordingly. So you can kind of see that in this view here. Let me close this box so you can actually see. So from left to right, I have with relative radius of 1, and then with the relative radius of 3, and then with relative radius of 5. So you can see that it optimizes the hole filling based on 2 different types of scanners. And then within this tab, oops, let me turn off one of these. So within this tab, you have the mesh optimization tool, which is similar to the post-processing. So if you have the mesh optimization tool, it's similar to the post-processing tools that used to be here, but now it's mesh optimization. So they introduced this Artec or artifact healing. So if you click that, you have the ability to remove small objects like before, and you know, do it based on the object size or triangle size, whatever is easier for you. And then the newest thing they introduced was this heal bad polygons. So if you select that, you have the ability to verify and correct problematic polygons. So non-manifold edges, dangling edges, crossing, folded with anger over, etc. And then you can also fix holes in here as well. And then on top of that, you have your mesh simplification, which is also in this folder. So if you're doing decimation to any level, you can do it either fast or regular, but they did introduce this slider. So if you want to target a specific polygon count, you could type in 2 million, and then it will adjust according to that, or you can use the slider. So in terms of exporting data, so This is something that's a little different in Artec Studio 18. You can do it the traditional way by going File, Export, and whatever is selected can get exported. But now you also have the ability to right-click on the mesh and press Export, and then you can export it to Design X, Control X, etc., or just in general. And while we're also over here, if I click the properties, let me move some things around so I can see it. So properties of our objects, if I click it, it's going to give me the basics, polygon size, the rough estimate of the file size of this export, and then the resolution, and then the source scans and the scanners they came from. So in this case, it came from 2 scans from 2 different scanners. If you highlight over here, you can see that it came out of the Spider and the Leo, and then vice versa. There's 2 scans, Spider and Leo. So if this is for the mesh, and if I click on the actual scan itself, so if I unclick this and I click on the Spider scan, you can see that I have a basic and an advanced tab. So in the basic tab, you just get the global registration, the frames, how many frames there are, texture frames, max error, scanner, and then scan date and time. And then in the advanced tab, it gives you a little bit more information, talking about tracking mode, factory calibration, and the scanner ID. So those are all very useful. If you forget you've done a specific step, you can always go back and verify based on, what it says. Like global registration's done, it had this amount of frames, etc. So one of the last things I'm going to hit on is the HD reconstruction. So in order to do the HD reconstruction in Artec Studio 18, you have to run a neural network AI thing. And what that will do is it will just run in the background for a bit, and then it will optimize your computer to run the HD reconstruction if you're using the Leo. And this is only for NVIDIA cards only, and it's GPU based. So testing is mandatory. And then the final thing I want to hit on is that with the introduction to the Ray 2, you can now import Ray 2 data. So you can import that file by pressing import and then Ray 2 scans, just like you would import a Leo project or photos, etc. So that's all I have with the UI, and now it's off to Arthur.
Thank you, Sam, so much for making that presentation. If at any point in time, if anyone has questions, feel free, type them in the chat. We're definitely gonna, review, or we can, talk about those specific questions you may have. But yeah, feel free to add that, in the chat, when you're ready. So I'm going to cover another portion and just kind of give a quick update here. So Sam, kind of just covered these different areas and options within the software. So a little bit, just Arthur is who I am. My background is industrial design, product design engineering, and this is just like a quick snapshot of just different projects that I've worked on. And in many respects, we've used 3D scanning as part of the process. So some of the areas that I'll begin to cover that are what's new inside of Artec Studio 18 have a lot to do with, just some enhancements in areas, taking a look at some new toolbars that were added and things of this nature. So I'm going to actually pull up here Artec Studio 18. So again, as Sam mentioned, we could see that, the UI, the UX has now been changed. So all of the recent projects, are now showing. So I'm going to open up this project as all what new. And one of the new aspects that have been added is within the defeature aspect. So most of you might be familiar with Groot from the Marvel superheroes movie set. And back here, we just have this huge kind of hole sitting here in the back, right? And if you haven't tried the defeature brush, it's located here in the editor's toolbar amongst the transform, rotate, positioning, smooth, eraser brush, but definitely the defeature brush is here. So this is an algorithm that within the hole filling, we used to get this option. Well, if I want to fill this hole, I could go ahead and use flat or smooth. So what they did is they basically carried over this algorithm of filling the hole smoothly. They carried this into the defeature brush, essentially. So I'm going to turn off this option over here. Maybe some of you might have noticed this, maybe not. It says select through. So when I do that, what that allows it is that when I'm holding control on the keyboard, and I'm using the middle mouse wheel. So if you haven't noticed that the brush size is changing by holding that middle mouse wheel. And basically I'm just gonna highlight while holding control on the keyboard, right? To just, basically grab that edge. Because I don't have select through turned on, it doesn't grab the other side of the face. And then when we click on apply, it's basically gonna fill in this hole nice and neat. Right, so that's a great addition to just kind of have that curvature continuity that you filled in for that whole algorithm just in general. So this is a new option that's been added specifically for the D feature brush. All right, taking a look at the next step, alignment. So for the UI, the UX, one of the things that has definitely kind of changed in terms of colors on the screen. So when you're going into the Align tab, so you can see we have the blue and red, the yellow and red colors that are reflected here as part of the actual individual scans. You can see the folders are for those. But when we go to the Align tab, previously the two base colors were blue and gray, or I'm sorry, blue and green. Now you can see that moving forward, the colors are going to be this gray and blue color. So when it's registered, as we've known before, it could be that blue color. So you can double click, as most of you know. You can also right mouse button click, say mark it unregistered. So if we go now to the not registered, this used to be green in color, so they changed it to gray, but that's still free to move around. So nothing has changed in that aspect as a whole. They've also added the ability to show the scan and texture colors. So if you have scanned with your Spider, your Eva, your Leo, and you have color or textures on the model, that can now be shown on the screen. So if I double click, you can see that the scan colors are now being shown, or again, you can drop this down and show the scan colors, not the textures. But it's totally your choice. But again, that's just a UI enhancement and update that they changed it from the green color previously to this gray color. Not a huge deal, but it's definitely helped for recognition of what's actually happening within the environment. Aligning to CAD data. So this is something that was, I know for me personally, I'm bringing in files from SolidWorks or from Rhino or any other neutral, kind of CAD files on Shape Fusion 360. So being able to bring CAD files in is as simple as saying file import CAD models. And then this gives you this option for step, IGES, and actually a new addition that's been added is .sat. So these are all neutral formats that can be imported into Artec Studio. But trying to align mesh data, which is what this data is right here, to CAD previously was not possible. So we can have the CAD model fixed, we have the mesh data, and we can just click on a line. And one of the things you'll notice is that there used to be a green bar down at the bottom to show the progress. But now here in the middle, there's a line tab, and you see the progress bar grows as it begins to align one mesh. You could do the method where you add the points. Either methodology works, whichever works easiest for you. But once that data is aligned, like mesh to CAD data is really a huge deal. This allows you to then do a whole host of, inspection analysis, deviation analysis, cross-section analysis between the two data sets. So it's no longer that you have to convert the mesh to CAD or the CAD to a mesh and kind of go from there. So there, the two geometries aligned to each other. And if it's just like a little tip, if you're rotating on the screen and it's rotating kind of like with not on center, Sam kind of mentioned this before, but it's always worth just revisiting where double click and it gives that little sphere, and then that's the center point on the screen from which you're rotating around from. If you want to deselect that, just double click anywhere on the screen and that comes back. All right, moving on to the next aspect that's been added for Artec Studio 18, So within the tools panel, so this is a huge deal, for me. Whereas we normally would have to go over here to the tools panel, and I'm sorry, editor, and under tools transform to get the move, rotate, and scale tools. So new in Artec 18, we have down here this little panel, which gives us this option to move, transform, and rotate. Now, here's a little trick. The same way that Sam showed earlier, how you can lock an object, because if we do the rotate, move, or transforms options, it's going to move both at the same time, and that's not what we're looking for. So we could go to this object, the CAD, and say lock object. Again, as Sam mentioned, it goes to this stripy gray kind of color here. So if we want to now move this, you'll see that it's only going to move just what's in yellow. And we can set the cursor to the geometric center, but it doesn't go to the center of the yellow because we're showing both data sets at the same time. So if I just quickly put the check mark to just hide that and now bring that back, you'll see that it now goes to the center of the yellow, and we can go ahead and really kind of like try to get this in position and move it, translate, and rotate this around as we need it to be. So that's a nice little, update here down here in the tools pop-up menu down at the bottom. So along with that, we have some other options, which being able to add certain types of options to imported CAD data. So we have both chamfers, fillet, and draft angles as being three options to add to a CAD file. So very easily we could say, well, I want to add a distance chamfer that's going to be symmetric. We can pick this edge, and it kind of gives a highlight. So if we need to change the actual value, we can see here there's a nice little highlight that's showing this chamfer running along this tangent propagation. So one of the things when you're modeling in CAD software, this arc is tangent to this line, the tangent to this edge. So this tangent propagation is allowing it to either, if I turn that off, it only goes along this edge, or when you get that on, it runs along the whole edge. So when you apply, you can see that chamfered edge is applied to the geometry. Again, this is an imported CAD file as a step, IGES, Parasolid file format. So along with that, we also have the fillet. So being able to just grab an edge, and again, seeing a preview at the values, we could make this, 30, you could make it 16, whatever value you'd like. And it's always giving you a nice little preview. Click apply, and that's onto the geometry. So they're just adding more functionality within the software that allows you to kind of add some things that you don't have to export it back out to make these changes. If you don't like the change, there is this little like undo, which is basically Control Z here in the box, and that will just take it back as if it didn't happen. Adding a draft. So this is a pretty simple block, but just to kind of communicate what we're trying to say is that when you're adding a draft, when you're using like injection molding, for example, your side walls, they can't be 90 degrees. They have to have some type of taper, some type of draft angle to them. So the first face that is selected, that's your zero datum from which it's parting out and creating the angle from. So we could say this face is what we're adding. Just to be dramatic, we're going to add a 15 degree. Normally it's like maybe 3 degrees at most, but it's showing you a preview of that 15-degree angle from this side. So we can click apply, and the dialog box is still open. So if you wanted to go ahead and click on this face and then add a draft to this face, you can add a different, draft value, and you can also put in a negative value. So if I can say -20, it's going to go in the opposite direction. So you can click apply, okay, and it applies that information. So again, just allowing you to do some base CAD features and functionality here in the software is essentially what they've added into the software. So again, this is CAD features. Next option, adding thickness. So I like to go back to this guy because he's one of my favorite characters in the movie. And what we're thinking about is using this for 3D printing, specifically SLS 3D or any powder-based printing. And one of the most important options or aspects of that is that this is just a hollow model, right? That this has no wall thickness, but especially as you want to leave a uniform wall thickness to the model so that the holes, the powder can be excavated in post processing. So here under the construct the measures tab, sorry, or down here in the toolbar, we have a thickness. So if we click on that, it's asking us, well, do you want to add this wall thickness to the inside or outside of the geometry? So if we put in 3 millimeters, it gives you a preview. So it's showing you the geometry going inwards, or you can also reverse it and go outwards. It's your choice depending on what you need to do. So we click on that, click apply, and now it's offsetting uniformly that 3 millimeters, and then it's going to cap it, right? So this is it's a watertight 100% model that's ready for 3D printing right here from the software. You could, if you wanted to really just double check this, you can add a section view that's going right through the model. So you can see this is a really nice addition that's been highlighted and added for in Artec Studio 18, is that even after if you have a plane, it's dynamic, so you can slide all the way through the model. So you can see here, it already has that uniform wall thickness all the way around. So that's a nice addition to just have, especially if a lot of you are doing 3D printing. So you can export this out as Sam showed earlier. You can say export this mesh as a STL file or OBJ, PLY, and that can go right to whatever type of 3D printing you're going to do from there. So this is a nice addition that's been added. And again, when I added that thickness, it kept the original. So you could have multiple versions at different wall thicknesses, if necessary. All right, converting to CAD. So rather converting a CAD to a mesh. So this is kind of an interesting aspect where if you want to use the CAD geometry to actually for Boolean operations inside of Artec Studio, we have this CAD file, and this has been imported. And part of the reason why I wanted to really show this in a simplified form is because when you're using this algorithm, it's converting it back from a BREP CAD data to mesh, so triangles or quads. The accuracy, this is really going to make a difference. So I'm going to turn this down to 10 so you really can kind of see what we're looking at. So when it converts it from the CAD file to the mesh at 10, it's a really low resolution, right? And that's generally, it's probably not going to be desirable. So the accuracy is how well is the mesh going to trace over this existing CAD geometry. So if we say at accuracy of 70, see, that's more than likely going to be enough, actually to trace over that existing, right? And you can always then really change if you want to switch it from, scan color to, X-ray. X-ray was probably one of my favorite. If you haven't tried X-ray, give that a try. You can bring up the brightness and kind of see through the object, so to speak. You can also switch it to wireframe, point cloud, wire over solid, or points over solid. So they have different ways with which you can render on the screen while it's in the X-ray mode, or even scan color. And again, if we had another operation, we could come down here to, if you guys haven't tried this, here under the edit menu, there's a Boolean operation. So you can add, union, subtract, or intersect any two mesh geometries inside of Artec Studio. And something that some of you might have missed that was added in 17 is the ability to take a mesh. So if you need to go to CAD software, trying to bring a mesh into CAD software definitely can be challenging. So here you have this option called auto surfacing. And we could say, well, I'd like to try at 1,000 patches, trace over this geometry. And it will do that. And then when it's done, you can then export out from Artec Studio as a actual CAD file. So 1,000 is definitely not enough. But again, just kind of illustrate that from here, when we do the export, we can export this to our CAD software, or also just export the model as a CAD object. So it'll be a step, IGES, or Parasolid XT file format. Okay, so that was, again, just kind of, just briefly viewed as the D feature brush. I kind of fill that in, that hole. We have the alignment aspect, where we'll be able to move things around, things change color from the green color to the blue. We have some new tools panels down here in the UI. And so now getting into the analysis aspect here. And first things first, distance analysis that we'll take a look at. So we have these two CAD objects that were overlaid on top of each other. And here under the measure tab, we have this option for do a distance map. And new to this option where we're comparing, if you will, how much deviation is there between the CAD model that was first designed and the machined or 3D printed, or however the model is actually manufactured. You can overlay the two data sets and then calculate either by shortest distance or along normals between these two options. So in the end, what you're looking at from a distance map, we could say at 1 millimeter, you could say, how well is your process quality inspection holding to the existing, your existing data. So if you've made this one time, 100 times, 10,000 times, you'd like to know that with intolerance, that the one that's number 10,000 is as good or close to the first one that came off of production lines. And continuing with that thickness analysis. So one of the things that we can go in, so this is mesh data. This is not a CAD file, right? So if we're not quite sure, if you can click on the little box right here, it fits it to screen. So when you're doing a thickness analysis, again, this is still under the measure tool. We can do section analysis, distance map. That same distance map, we can click on here under thickness and we can calculate. We're saying we're looking to see, make sure this is uniform wall thickness across the board. And we can click on 1 millimeter, click on calculate. And this is going to run through and check the entire model and actually show us and highlight saying, well, within this specification, we can also show the min-max values that'll call out to the model, say, and look at the values that and the range that we've specified. So if we want to bring that scale down to really begin to examine the thickness of the geometry, you have that, and you can also save this as a map. Again, so we're still in the analysis aspect, and we're talking about now cross sections. So again, leading back to the beginning where we're being able to align mesh and CAD data to each other, we'd like to see just as a cross section. So here under measure, under sections and volume, we're basically saying we'd like to cut a cross section anywhere through both geometries at the same time. So if you want to change the plane and the aspect that it's cutting through, it's dynamic. So you have the triad. So anywhere you want to have that plane, or you can create your own plane where you want it to be specifically. All right. So when we look at that analysis, we could say, well, here's the actual. We'll hide the two meshes, and we can see the two cross sections of the geometries, the min and max deviation, right, of the actual. And if you need to recalculate, you can go back through it and adjust your tolerances. The curvature combs here that's showing the deviation between the two, that can also be enhanced or lengthened, so you can actually see, well, how far, and it's giving you a call out wherever your mouse is to show you exactly how much deviation there is between the two. Again, similar to the distance map, with the cross sections, you can also do shortest distance or along normals, depending on what information you need to grab at that particular point in time. All right, so we're exit back out. And last but not least, in terms of the analysis, is the actual fitting of primitives. So if any of you need to take your geometry, really start to do some reverse engineering, Artec has really been focusing on enhancing and getting closer and closer to in terms of reverse engineering capability. Because as we know, the scan data really is kind of here to be representative, but we need this to actually be true arcs, true lines, things of this nature. So when you're going here to the construct tab, and we're going to fit the type of geometries that we'd like to go to this mesh, for example, how it fit to that geometry has been enhanced. So previously in the advanced tab, we had robust, exact, and expanding. So those three were already there in the software. But two new options is how well or how is this going to look at this data set when it's tracing these geometries. So in other words, if we look at this in wireframe, if we zoom in really closely, we can kind of see when you're looking at polygons and you're using this method to fit, it's going to look at the center point of each polygon versus vertices, it's going to look at each vertex point. So depending on what and how you want this geometry to fit, just going to hold control on the keyboard and just going to mouse over, and I'm leaving this in vertices mode. So technically speaking, for the most part, the vertices is going to be a little bit more accurate, but it's very dependent, again, on how much you have selected when it's fitting this cylinder to that existing geometry. All right, so you always give it a once over, kind of look at, see like, well, how well is this actually tracing the data that we're looking for? All right, the great thing about these primitives that we're adding here in Artec Studio and is that these can also be exported out as CAD objects so that you can reference this information in your CAD software. So if I went through and really kind of used that again as a leverage point, I'm thinking about, like, I've set this whole model up with planes, with cylinders in different parts or different aspects of the models to be used as reference point to help me truly reverse engineer this whole model back into a CAD file. Right, so it's kind of same thing with the planes. If we want to do this and we just highlight this model, one of the things that kind of knows if it grabs too much, in this case it's not, but you can always adjust the segmentation sensitivity and bring that up or down, that slider, and it will adjust how much it actually uses when it's fitting that plane to what's selected. All right, and I'm trying to keep up, but let me know if there's any questions in the chats, guys. All right, so we have primitive fitting that we've just reviewed. So again, last but not least, that's really brand new that we definitely love a lot is the Ray 2 3D scanner. And this is for scanning, large rooms, buildings, things of this nature, things that would take you a really long time to do with the actual, like if you did any of the handheld units. So the Ray is a terrestrial tripod-based system. So scanning this entire room happened pretty much in one go. So you could see that this workshop, you can actually see there's point clouds. So actually, technically speaking, there's actually 3 scans, right? So you can see here, the scanner was here in this location. I can tell because the scanner can't see under itself. That's why it's a perfect circle, so to speak. Then it was moved over here to capture this angle. and then the last one was on the other side over here. So those 3 scans combined, this is still a point cloud data set that was then used to then create an actual mesh. And then this can be exported out directly as an OBJ, STL file, and used for reverse engineering purposes. This is an example where we're actually combining Leo data with actual RT, Ray 2 data sets. So here in this aspect where we want some higher resolution detail than what's coming from the Ray 2 data. So if we turn off and we show just what's captured from the actual, the Ray 2, and we can turn on the Leo data set, we can see here you're capturing much more or higher resolution data set. And because you're always working inside of Artec Studio, you're using both data sets at the same time. So you're getting the best of both worlds, right? So this is just data that was captured here. You can see like this is Leo data being merged onto data that was captured from Array 2. Okay. Last example I'll show here is scanning like a full like MEP system. And this plant, like if you had to try to scan this with a handheld, you'd be there for quite some time. On the quickest setting, the Ray 2 is scanning anywhere up to from 30 seconds to 2.5 minutes to scan and create this point cloud data set, which is then imported in, and then this is now created as an actual mesh. Thank you guys for joining, our session, both, on behalf of Direct Dimensions and Sam, Michael, Haley, Will, the whole team. Like, this is a great, first effort, that of many more to come, that, we're here to help. So if you guys have questions in general about Artec, about scanning, photogrammetry, what have you, like there's very little that we haven't scanned and there's very little technology that we haven't used. So we're here to definitely communicate that, with everyone, and, just really be here as a resource for you. So we thank everyone for joining, and you definitely look forward to future endeavors. Okay, thank you, everyone.